Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Bobby Gilstrap, and this is our series on the presidential candidates that are running to be the president of the Southern Baptist Convention in 2028. I'm delighted to have as our guest today the first announced candidate, which is Dr. Willy Rice. Dr. Rice is the pastor of Calvary Baptist Church in Clearwater, Florida, has been there now 27 years. Dr. Rice has been pastor there for 27 years and was actually saved and baptized, licensed, and ordained to preach there at Calvary. And then he returned to be the pastor there in 2004. He's married with 3 adult children and has 3 grands. And so we're delighted to have him joining us today. Dr. Rice, good to have you be with us today.
It's good to be here. Thank you, Bobby, for the privilege.
Well, we're glad to have you as our first guest. Our SBC Issues group sponsors these, and they ask all of the questions that we basically are going to ask. We've had to digest them. We've had more than 50 questions that were asked through the group. And so we want to address those and try to answer as many of those as possible. But then obviously there are some things that you want to make sure to communicate from your heart as well. And so we welcome that as well. So let's jump right into it. As we do, if folks would like to see more of your background, we're going to put a link in the video description to your church's website. They can look there on the leadership page and see more about your background and some of your history. And that's great. And you've also have a video and some other materials that you've already published that state what you're calling your 7 pillars that you're running on, basically. And those would be a good place to go and see a digest of that if people would like to do that. So let's go ahead and just start off with this, Brother Willy. What is the most important issue that you feel right now needs to be the focus of the Southern Baptist Convention?
Well, again, Bobby, thank you for the privilege of being here. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving and getting back into the routine. I know for pastors and church leaders, this is a busy season. So I'm honored that anybody would take some time to talk about this. And, I think if you just condensed it all, I think we're in need of renewal. I think you sense over the last, I would say about a decade, hard to put an exact finger on it, the exact moment, but you've seen what I call the seams of our fellowship. They've been stretched and they've been stressed, and a lot of us have been looking at that and wondering, okay, exactly what's going on there. And so I think what we need is a renewal movement. We can talk about the pillars and the individual things that are part of that, but if you look at the big picture, in my life, I've been here 21 years actually, and been a pastor for 40 years, 41, I guess. And I think, Bobby, in my life, I've gone through 3 stages, one of which was early on. Being a Southern Baptist was an asset. I pastored a little church in Alabama and then for several years in Pensacola. And I think for the first part of my ministry, to say you were a Southern Baptist, people were proud of that. That was a good thing. That was a positive thing. And then I think there was a period of time when it was kind of a neutral thing. A lot of our time here in Clearwater, it's not a typical Baptist area. In the Deep South, it's more of a melting pot area. And it's not, positive or negative, it's kind of a neutral thing. You had to kind of educate people. In the last couple of years, it's kind of felt like a negative thing. It's kind of felt like an anchor on the boat almost. It's like I'm spending more time deflecting, defending, explaining, and it just seems concerning. And I think we would love to get back to a time when our churches and our leaders are excited about what we're doing. They feel great about what we're doing. Look, there's a lot of good things we can celebrate, but I think a lot of us know, okay, there's a level of frustration and fragmentation that can no longer be ignored. So if you ask me what's the big issue, I think the big issue is we need a renewal. We need a spiritual renewal movement that really impacts our convention again.
Well, I think many people would agree with you on that. And you, as a president of the Southern Baptist Convention, you have limited power. It's not like you become the president and you can go in and clean house here and clean house there and
right.
reorchestrate things. So you are very limited. And what I have seen for many years, but particularly the last half dozen years or so, is some of the demands being put on those who are in that role as SBC president are unrealistic to the role in the sense of understanding what their real power is. And so to say you're going to go in and totally change the trustee system, which is one of the complaints of trustees, that's not something that you can realistically do, but you can influence some direction, influence some of those things, be involved in some of those areas. Uh, I think today it would be great, some of the things that may be hindering that kind of renewal that you're calling for and wanting and desiring to see, maybe some of the issues that we need to address, issues with the North American Mission Board, issues with the failed strategy of Great Commission resurgence that we saw happen back in 2010 and beyond, as that came into place. The issues of women pastors, all those kind of things are things that need to be addressed and need to be dialogued about. Let's just start with this. Let's just talk about what issues do you see are relative with the North American Mission Board? I know this has been one of the things that kind of came to the surface a number of years ago, more so than in the past, in issues of trust and leadership and a lot of other things. Give us your take on this and what steps need to be taken, maybe.
Well, I don't know that the North American Mission Board is necessarily the source of frustration or the fragmentation. It's a lot of where it boils up into, because you have a lot of church plants, you have church leaders, you have different kinds of churches, planting churches from across the spectrum of the SBC. I was a trustee there. And we may not see this the same way. I mean, I love the people there. I have great friendships there. I enjoyed my time there. I went there wanting to be a part of church planting. Our church has been a part of church planting. We planted a number of churches in the local area, in addition to campuses we've started, and in addition to churches we've supported across the country. So I wanted to be a part of church planting. I appreciated the focus of the North American Mission Board on church planting. But I think one of the things you're seeing, not just with the North American Mission Board, just across the board, is you're hearing people asking questions about, the transparency issue has come up, the financial accountability issue has come up, and they're not, what I'm hearing, Bob, is that they're not satisfied with some of the answers that they're getting. And I think that is an issue. It did get to the floor of the convention a little bit. There was a vote on some of the things. Rhett Burns has been a guy, some of you know Rhett in South Carolina. He's been raising the issue of financial accountability and 990 level information. And I just kind of watched that play out. I joked when I first heard Rhett, mentioning 990 level information, and I'm not at the North American Mission Board anymore. But when I first heard that being raised, I was like, I don't even know what a 990 is. I'm not an accountant. And what got my attention was the responses to that. What got my attention was when people started responding. Some of the leaders and entity heads started saying things like, well, the reason we don't do 990 level transparency is because the trustees know all that information. And I immediately went, well, that's not true. I know the trustees don't know all that information because I was there. I didn't know all that information. I didn't even know there was a 990 form. I didn't know what it should have been asking for or looking for. And I'm not accusing anyone of hiding anything there. I just think when you don't give that information, all of a sudden people start asking, well, what is being hidden? Why can't you share that information? So I know, for instance, that trustees don't know all that information. We've been told different, but I can tell you, go around. What I've said, Bobby, is you can go around to any trustee that you know. Most of us know a trustee on one of our boards or entities and ask them, do they know that information? And you can figure out what the 990, it's not a lot of information, actually. But one of the things was the top 5 salaries of the organization. And again, I didn't know this till it came up. But ask the trustee, do you know that? I've yet to talk to one who said they did. I've yet to talk to one who, I'm not even asking for the information. I'm not even asking you to reveal anything. I want to simply know you're an elected trustee of the SBC. Do you know that for your entity? I've yet to have one person go, I absolutely know it. I could tell you if I wanted to. That bothers me. So when I heard people responding to Rhett, I go, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if the answer is the 990. I think it ought to be, maybe a group ought to look at it like an outside task force. That's one of the things I've proposed, is maybe look at some of our financial protocols, some of our trustee training, the level of information that trustees are being given. And to me, that's one of the big issues. It's much bigger than any one entity. It has to do with our trustee system.
Yeah, and the pushback to some extent has been when organizations like Planned Parenthood and those kind of groups are actually disclosing that on the 990 form. Rhett nor anyone else has said Southern Baptist entities should be disclosing to the IRS that 990 form. They're just wanting
Right.
that kind of disclosure to those who are giving the money, which is the local churches, obviously. But as you're saying, even the trustee boards do not know that basic information, and there's no concerns about breach of security or anything else the way it's being presented. Yet that's been voted down multiple times. Among the issues with the North American Mission Board, we had just recently this cancellation of the retirees' life insurance. Now, basically, what that policy was basically a death benefit. Was not very much, like $20,000 or something like that for the member, the staff member, and another 5 or 10 or something was for the spouse. This is a big deal. I had a call from a retired NAM staffer 15 minutes before you and I got on the line here. He called. I had to put him off and say, I'll have to call you back later because I was talking to you. But one of his concerns was, I need to know what's happening. I'm hearing there may be a class action suit. I'm hearing and I don't know what all is going on with that. But he was in part of that wave back in 2011 after Kevin Ezell first came on in the fall of 2010, and they just showed the door to a large number of employees just in one big swath. And this was part of the commitment that the North American Mission Board put in. If you'll go ahead and retire now rather than stay on, this will be part of what we will do. And now they're withdrawing it. How do you respond to that kind of, I guess, lack of fulfillment of the commitment that they made to these staff members?
Yeah, Bobby, I guess in all honesty, I don't know enough about that situation yet. I read it just, what did it come out a week or so ago? And I saw that, I can understand people's concern and frustration. I don't know enough about why that decision was made or the finances behind that decision. My understanding has been finances at NAM have been very strong. They have a lot of reserves. That's my understanding. It was when I was there. And so I don't know the reason behind that. I haven't heard the reason behind that. Obviously, whenever you promise somebody something and don't keep it, that's a concern. People are upset about that, but I don't know enough about it to comment on it intelligently, at least in terms of why it happened. I don't understand the reasoning behind it.
Okay. Well, and hopefully you'll get more information on that and be able to diagnose that further, but because that apparently is a big deal. And you're right. If the North American Mission Board is doing as well as what the public reports, I mean, as far as what we can see publicly, then this is really concerning that they would cut off our retirees after we've made such a commitment. All right, let's move forward. Let's talk a little bit about the Great Commission as a whole. Do you feel like we are accomplishing the Great Commission today more effectively since the Great Commission Task Force report was approved? Is that continuing, or do you think we're less effective across the board?
Well, it's hard to say. I was for that task force when it came out, and I mean, we'd probably see that differently just on the background. I thought it made sense. But I also don't think anybody would look at the last 15 years, what's it been, 15 years maybe or so since that came out, and go, hey, there's been some great commission resurgence. A lot of what came out in that report was aspirational, and a lot of it was just reorganization in hopes that it would position us to see some kind of great commission resurgence. I think, there are a lot of things, again, if we were going to talk about NAM, there are a lot of things that, I thought we did well. I thought, there was a kind of a reorientation of a focus on church planning and a prioritization of church planning that I thought was a good thing. I thought there were some standards for church planners that were put into place that were good. That we still use them at Calvary. We still use some of the pipeline stuff. In fact, we've worked with both NAM and IMB on that. But I don't think whether you blame that report or the reorganization that came about, I don't know that you could say, but that's the reason why. But I don't know that any of us would look at what is happening in our Baptist movement and say, oh, wow, there's been a great commission resurgence. I think there's some concerns. I think even in the International Mission Board, there are concerns about the number of missionaries. We've seen that go down, actually. We've seen cooperative. I think one of the clearest things where we ought to look at is cooperative program giving has gone down. And it's well short of its high mark earlier I'm not sure what the high year was, but it's been in the early 2000s. And so we've seen that decline. So I think some of those key indicators would tell us that there are some concerns.
Yeah, it seems like there are from some of the things that seem to be surfacing. Now, you've mentioned a couple of other things that relate kind of to a broader perspective here. And some of those relate to the trust in leadership. And we're hearing that the continued rumblings about what's happening, not just the North American Mission Board, but we've had several things that have surfaced. How do you think, as president, you can relate to some of those things and those individuals and help guide the convention back more toward this renewal that you've said that you would have a real heart to see happen, and maybe be able to turn the numbers around to going up instead of down on the chart as we look at it put out there with the metrics?
I've said this, Bobby. I think our convention is better when it's led by pastors and churches and not entities and executives. And that is not a shot at our entities or executives. I'm friends with many of them, worked with many of them. I know and respect them and appreciate them. But when you think about the Southern Baptist Convention and its greatest years, its strongest years, you think about the conservative resurgence, for instance, and that really was a renewal in the latter part of the 20th century. We saw some really important things happen. It was led by pastors. It was led by churches. And somewhere in the early 2000s, I think that shifted. And I'm not saying anybody tried to do anything intentional, malevolent there, but it kind of shifted to where our dominant leaders and dominant personalities became maybe the seminary presidents and some of the entity heads, and they were the big influencers that everybody was looking at. I think we're healthier when churches are the big influences. And so I think that's why I would want to say to the entity heads, I don't want to be your enemy. I don't want to fight. But I do want to say there needs to be some accountability. We need to sit down with pastors. What I've learned over the last couple of years, and as you know, I've been on a little bit of a journey myself, and my perspective has changed in the last couple of years based on some things that, I experienced. And what I've learned is that there are people who are frustrated, and a lot of people in leadership just want to dismiss them. They want to say, hey, those are just malcontents, loud, noisy, rabble rousers, and we can kind of overlook those people. And I think that's wrong. I mean, some of the things I've heard in the last few months, I've heard from, people, I've heard from pastors who are friends of mine say things like, I'm concerned who you're talking to. Probably some people concerned I'm on this podcast. I'm concerned who you're talking to now. And my response is, I'm concerned you're not talking to them. It's like, how can we move together and experience a renewal if we're not willing to listen to a significant percentage of our convention that really is frustrated. There's a group in our convention, and I don't know what you would call them. I kind of call them the reforming right. And by reforming, I'm talking about small r, not capital R. I'm not talking necessarily about Calvinism, non-Calvinism. I'm talking about people that want renewal. You might call it the renewing right. There's a group of conservatives that want to see renewal. And that number is anywhere on the low end from about a third of the people showing up at our convention to the high watermark was probably the high 40 percentile, probably Mike Stone's election in Nashville, where he got 47, 48% and fell short in that election. So it's anywhere from a third to 47, 48% of people who are in what I would just call a renewing or reforming right. And you cannot have renewal and health in our convention if you just ignore that group of people. If your strategy is just show them the back of the hand, they're just all malcontents. They're all, troublemakers who want to burn the house down. They're just, whatever. And when I first, I tell you, Bobby, when I first started hearing some of the criticisms coming from the right, and I was in some of these leadership positions and enjoyed it. Again, I love the Southern Baptist Convention. I'm not trying to burn it down. I've been state convention president. I've been president of the Pastors Conference. I've had the privilege of doing a lot of things and made a lot of good friends and enjoyed that very, very much. I'm not trying to burn the house down. But when I heard in the 2010s, a lot of people starting to express concerns, there were, back then they called them bloggers, they have websites and now they're posting and doing podcasts like this. What I first heard was these are just malcontents. Like how can these people say we're not conservative enough? And they were raising issues like critical theory. They were raising issues like women pastors. And people were just thinking, that's not a problem. Don't worry about that. These are just people that are upset that they're not in power anymore. And I kind of bought a little of that. I kind of just assumed that was the case. I was told once by a leader, I won't even mention the word Conservative Baptist Network. That was when that was a big thing. And there's still some folks there. But I was told I won't even say the words. And I thought to myself, that doesn't sound like a good strategy. We're not even going to say the words. And in the last couple of years, what I've met with a lot of those guys who are in that movement, I don't even know how much of a movement it is right now. I don't know that they have meetings, and I don't know that I've ever been to a meeting of the Conservative Baptist Network. But I've met a lot of guys who were in those meetings, and I have found that they don't have horns and a tail. They weren't trying to burn the house to the ground. I have found good conservative Baptist people who are just concerned about some things. And we could talk about a bunch of different groups. And what I had to admit, Bobby, is they've been right about a whole lot of stuff. They were right about critical theory. They were right about warning us about the sexual abuse reform movement. They were right when they were warning us about the rising support for women pastors. They've just been right. I'm talking about a bunch of different groups. They've been right about a lot of things. So to me, what I want to say to those who are in leadership is you cannot ignore, and let's call it 40%. Let's call it 40%. Let's just throw a number at it. You can ignore, and by the way, that's not 40% of the Southern Baptist Convention. That's 40% of the people who show up at a Southern Baptist Convention meeting. If you get out into our churches and talk to our pastors, that number is far, far higher. We are a conservative, Bible-believing people. Like the issue of women pastors, that's not a controversial issue among most Baptist people. That's a settled issue. That's not like some far right issue. That's who we are and who we've always been. But when you get to the convention, you don't always have a representative number of the actual Southern Baptist constituency because you have people who work for the system. They're going to show up. Pastors that can afford it, they tend to show up. And so you don't always have the exact representation. So to answer your question, what I would say is to those in leadership, we cannot ignore 40% of this convention. We cannot tell them to go take a hike and act like there's some rabble that gets stirred up by a few troublemakers. These are good people who have genuine concerns and they need to be listened to.
Well, and the last couple of years, we had what became known as the Law Amendment,
Right.
where they were attempting to add an amendment to the Constitution of the Southern Baptist Convention, and not just in our Articles of Faith, the Baptist Faith and Message, and that failed, but it barely failed.
Well,
I believe.
It got, as you know, it's almost a super majority. It fell just sort of what we call a super majority.
Exactly.
But the overwhelming majority of the convention supported it, and supported it even though some of our entity heads spoke out against it. So, that number is 40%, but that's a low number. You add a bunch of people to that number when you start defining some of those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Pastor Willie, I want you to respond to this. This is a very short clip, but one of the churches that has really come to the surface in this woman pastor issue has been Fielder Road in Texas. And the Southern Baptist Convention of Texas convention, they sent that to the Credentials Committee over that church. And last year, after the law amendment failed at the convention, this is a brief clip of the pastor there, and I can't say his last name. First name is Jason, but there at Fielder Road, his addressing his congregation about that particular amendment and it failing. So I want you to respond to this on the other side.
There was another amendment that was voted upon to the bylaws of the Constitution that says that any church that has female pastors of any kind would be considered no longer in friendly cooperation with the Southern Baptist Convention, which means after a while, it takes 2 years sequentially for that to be voted on. And if it's ratified, then churches that have female pastors would be removed from the Southern Baptist Convention, disfellowshipped. Fielder Church falls into that category. We unwaveringly, unequivocally, gratefully have female pastors in this church. And we believe that that decision is scripturally accurate.
Respond to that, Pastor Willie.
Well, I've met Jason. I don't know him well. Met him. I like him. I'm sure he loves the Lord, and we're brothers in Christ. I'm sure all those things. We're not being mean. We're not trying to be ugly toward one another. So don't want to, heap a bunch of qualifiers on it. But the truth is, I have no desire to be unkind to Jason, but I disagree with him. I don't think it's scripturally accurate. And I don't think Southern Baptists think it's scripturally accurate. The Baptist Faith and Message is actually quite clear on this issue. That was the amendment the changes that were made in 2000, that it does equate in the issue about pastors, that the word pastor, elder, overseer. And that's very, very clear. Pastor is not pulled out and given some, it refers to something else. No, pastor is the overseer shepherd of the church. And that is for men as qualified by Scripture. And we hold to that conviction, not because we think badly of women or we think overly highly of men. That has nothing to do with it. It has to do with we think highly of biblical authority. The Bible says something, and we think it's very, very clear. We think gender is a beautiful creation of God. It's not a glass ceiling to be broken. It's a beautiful design to be embraced. We live in a culture that is confused about gender. It's been one of the most tragic, almost, I would say, demonic things we've seen in our culture is this confusion about gender. And yet here we are, Southern Baptists, who seem to be confused about it in terms of the biblical offices that the New Testament itself prescribes. So I disagree with Jason, and I think he's wrong. But here's what's happened with Fielder Road. Over the last several years, we've been trying to get this amendment passed. 60% of our convention is in favor of it. That means an overwhelming majority. And remember, 2 of our entity leaders spoke out against it. And they have their right to do so. Dr. Orr spoke out against it pretty strongly at the last convention, basically telling us if we passed it, we'd probably get sued. And yet 60% of our people still voted for that amendment. So you have this intractable situation where a majority of Southern Baptists clearly want to make a statement about women pastors, and yet we were unable to get to a super majority because some people were, I guess, worried about putting it in the bylaws. And the Baptist Faith and Message is very, very clear. So I think this election is going to be really important in the next year. We cannot keep coming back to this again and again. It's not fair to anybody. I think clarity is kindness in an age of apostasy. So we need to be clear about what our convictions are, and they've already been stated in the Baptist Faith and Message. And again, I have no animosity toward Field of Road, but if as a church you want women pastors, then you should not be in the Southern Baptist Convention. We just need to be able to say that. We can part as friends. We can pray God's blessing upon you as much as we disagree. We disagree. And Southern Baptists have been very clear. We believe the office of pastor is the same thing as the elder, overseer, as described in the New Testament, and that is an office reserved for men. We believe the Bible teaches that. It's part of God's design. So we need a plan, Bobby, we need a plan for dealing with this. We need a plan for dealing with this. I think I have one. I've floated this idea to several people, and if I get the chance, it's something that we'll go to work on, and maybe I can dive into it a little bit very quickly. Again, I'd be for, if you brought up another version of the Law Sanchez Amendment, I'd be for it. Maybe you get to 66%. But I think you got to think of another way also, because we got a majority of people that want to do this. So one of the things that I propose is a task force that would come. We've done this several times in our convention, but a task force to deal with the issue of understanding the term pastor as it is taught in the New Testament and as it is practiced by Baptist people. What does a pastor mean? And have a task force that can be appointed by the next president. That task force could prepare a report, and in that report, bring up several specific recommendations for how we are to act and how we are to understand this term pastor, and how we are to act when churches understand it and apply it differently. It could be a strong report if the people on it are strong. So the next president has to be somebody who's going to put strong convictional people on there. But that report could then be enacted by a simple majority of our convention. And that report could carry great weight. It wouldn't be a bylaw, but we've enacted many other things that carry great weight by a simple majority. So I think that's one way of getting to a place where a simple majority of our people could say, okay, this is what we mean by the term pastor, and this is how we mean to apply it, and this is how we will act when churches apply it differently.
Thank you for laying that out for us. I think there, like you said, there is a majority, and I think I would concur that if you got into the pews and the chairs and the assembly rooms of Southern Baptists across this country, much greater majority than 60% would probably be in line with it.
And when we've actually voted on some churches, as you know, Saddleback and the church that was in Virginia, it was like 90%. So this is not just some crazy right-wing issue. This is a core mainstream issue for Southern Baptists. It's in our Baptist Faith and Message. And the churches that are playing games with words and titles, and we got different kinds of pastors, they're the ones who are innovating. They're the ones who are changing. They're the ones who are trying to move the boundary line, so to speak. And you know what? I would even be charitable to say some of them may have done that unconsciously or inadvertently. Maybe they just, there's some churches, maybe they just thought they were being clever and creative with titles. And so we just going to give everybody, we're going to call pastor means anybody who serves on a pastoral staff. But that's not what a pastor means. There's a difference between somebody who is the shepherd, elder, overseer of the church and somebody who works in vocational ministry. Everyone who works in vocational ministry is not a pastor.
Yeah, and I want you to unpack this a little bit more, because one of the targeted statements to try to discourage people from approving the Law Amendment and the Sanchez Amendment has been people are out to get rid of women in ministry. They're attacking it. Women shouldn't be in ministry. They're taking this to the extreme, and just because you call them pastor, they're saying no women in ministry. But the people that I've talked to and that I know, they're not attacking women in ministry.
I'm not saying that. I wouldn't agree with that.
Well, no, because we have missionaries we've sent all over the world
Yeah.
who have been ministering and a part of. I had an aunt who served 32 years in Indonesia and Taiwan, and she was a part of helping plant many churches in that region of the world, but she wasn't the pastor of any of them. But you couldn't tell me she was not a key part of that ministry and ministering in that way. So address this for us real quickly.
I think it's a very important distinction, Bobby. And again, if there are people pushing this, then I wouldn't go with them to this degree. But I don't think there are people pushing this. I think that's kind of a straw man argument. We are not opposing women in vocational ministry. There are all kinds of vocational ministry positions. You mentioned people serving in international missions. I've got women who serve on my staff in our communications department, in our finance department. I mean, I got all kinds of women serving in our finance department. Our CAO leading our finance department, it has been with us. Been with me for 21 years, is a woman. We've got women serving in local missions. So I have women serving, but none of them are pastors. They're not overseeing the church. They're not elders. They wouldn't even think of that. And so I do think we got sloppy with our language. And we got sloppy with our ecclesiology. And I do think there are some churches that just started using the term pastor as shorthand for pastoral staff. The problem is that's not an innocent mistake. It leads somewhere. It changes over time our understanding of who and what a pastor is. And it will absolutely lead to women pastors, women senior pastors. You remember when Rick Warren first ordained like 4 women pastors. He came out at first, he said, but we don't really think they're elder overseers. They're pastors in function, not in office. And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. And I appreciate many things Rick has done, but I thought, gosh, that doesn't make sense. And but then like a year later, he was full blown, no, women can serve as pastors. That's where that trajectory always is going to lead. It might not happen as quickly as it did at Saddleback, but that's where it's going to lead. And that's why the Field of Road situation is a problem. If they have just been sloppy in their terms and used the term pastor inappropriately, then hopefully clarity would motivate them to walk that back and be more in line with the New Testament. We only use the term pastor to actually describe an elder, overseer, pastor. But I think that horse kind of already left the barn there. As the clip showed, they were very proud that they have women pastors. And I don't think they're just talking about vocational ministers. I think they're talking about people who are pastoring and overseeing in the church. I don't know. They could clarify that. But the use of the term is not just an innocent mistake. It's problematic, and it will lead to theological compromise. And we absolutely have to deal. This is not like some tangential issue that isn't important. This is a fundamentally important issue to biblical authority and to the proper application of the Baptist faith and message. And we have to deal with it. We have to deal with it. And if my plan's not the right plan, everybody running next year ought to be asked that question. What are you going to do to solve this issue? And I've told you what I would do. And there may be a better idea, but that's one idea that I think we could use to solve this issue.
Well, and the failing of the Credentials Committee to move forward with what is definitively a biblical position is part of the reason why people are pushing for this to be put in the Constitution. And that's what's concerning. You don't change your Constitution in any organization on a whim.
No.
But that's why many people are arguing that this needs to be put in the Constitution, so there is no more question about that.
Yeah, leadership by bylaw change is clunky. It's not an efficient, effective way to lead, but sometimes it's necessary, of course, because bylaws are necessary. But you're exactly right. The reason it got to that point was the process wasn't working. So when people say, well, we have a process, well, we do, but it's not working. or we wouldn't be here. It's clear where it's not working. So I think maybe a task force, a kind of super task force that's outside the system, but is strong convictional leaders, theologians, and pastors, and making a definitive statement on this with some recommendation for actions. It would come back to the convention, and now all the convention has to do is approve it 51% and 50% plus one, and we'll get a majority, and that would give great clarity to the national convention, and I think that'll work its way down through the state conventions. I know the national convention can't order state conventions to do anything, right, but if the national convention is clear, the state conventions will follow suit, I think. And in some cases, state conventions are out in front of us. I think Missouri passed a really good report. So some of the state conventions are doing a better job of this than we are nationally.
Right. And the autonomous nature of local churches, they don't want to align with any of those kind of things. They can do their own thing. They don't basically have to sign the Baptist Faith and Message per se.
They can do anything they want. They can do anything they want.
Yeah, exactly. One of the other things that's popped up just here in the last 2 weeks that we didn't address a while ago when we were talking about the North American Mission Board is this lawsuit that Will McRaney had against the North American Mission Board. It's bounced around several times, different courts, and ended up back in the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court. And it just sat there for the longest time. And this was being appealed again about it being thrown out in the Northern District, U.S. District Court in Mississippi. And the decision finally came back, and it was a three-member justices on the ruling, and it was 2-1 for the North American Mission Board. And the dissenting vote on that board was very strongly, as though, even though the justice is not Southern Baptist, but had a grasp of who Southern Baptists are, our autonomy, that the North American Mission Board is not it's not a hierarchical organization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The concern that now has really resurfaced in all of this is it was announced last week that McRaney is going to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court and not to the en banc, which is the full 9 justices of the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court. Don't understand and don't know the reasoning legally behind that. I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. Most of us probably don't understand, but this is what his legal team has determined. They're going to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. One of my big concerns, and concerns I know of many Southern Baptists, is that in this process, since 2017, going back and forth in the courts, the North American Mission Board has repeatedly misled the court with statements they've made. Just simple things like calling themselves the SBC Mission Board. There's no such thing. We have multiple mission boards. Referring to the Southern Baptist Convention as the Southern Baptist Church, like you do with the Catholic Church, understanding the Catholic Church is very hierarchical. And they've used that kind of phraseology over and over and over in the court documents. The arguments have been from the attorneys that that's a way of trying to help them identify that the Southern Baptists are just like the Methodists or whatever. And oddly, one of those who signed on with Will McRaney in his appeal there at the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court was the Church of Scientology and others. There were many others, including, I think, 160 or so Southern Baptist leaders who wrote to support him. Morris Chapman, Randy Adams, some others that were on that list as well. How do we... I don't know. I don't even know how to ask the question. How do we address these deceptions that have been now put into the court record that misrepresent who we are? And if it goes to the Supreme Court and they accept it, there is a limited amount of time for the executive committee, state conventions, any of those to make some kind of an appeal to say, look, that was misrepresented, or best would be the North American Mission Board trustees come out and say, no, that was incorrect. That was misrepresenting who we are as Southern Baptists. Every organization is autonomous. long way to get to that. But respond to that. I mean, what are we going to do?
Bobby, I don't know. I mean, I probably nothing. Honestly, I don't think the Supreme Court will hear it, but I'm not a lawyer and not a prognosticator. So I think when the North American Mission Board appealed a decision up the Supreme Court, they didn't hear it either. So I doubt very seriously. I think it's probably mostly done. Again, I was there at the North American Mission Board as a trustee when some of that was happening. I wasn't there when the incident occurred, but during my 4 years there, it was always a matter. So I was briefed on it from time to time, and I certainly know some things from the North American Mission Board's perspective. And I don't really want to litigate that case. I also know Will, and I hate. What I would say is I hate lawsuits. I just hate that we have these lawsuits, and I wish they didn't happen, and I wish it'd go away. And I think that's what I would say. I don't know enough about, the ins and outs of all the filings. I don't know. We may see this differently. I don't know the North American Mission Board is misrepresenting who they are. I was not aware of that. I didn't see that. It's an unfortunate case. I hope it is over. I hate these lawsuits. I don't think that is a good way for us to settle our disputes. So that would be my take. I hope the lawsuit is over and done. I'm sorry people have been hurt, but I wish we didn't go to lawsuits to solve our problems.
Hey, let's take another turn. Let's talk about the annual meeting. If you're the president, one of the things that is a recurring complaint from our annual meetings, and of course that's one of the main tasks the president's responsible for, right? Yeah. Bringing together the annual meeting and working on the agenda. But one of the problems that always surfaces, it seems like, is messengers don't have opportunity to debate, to dialogue, to really get answers to questions because it's such a reduced time frame. And one of the things a member of our Facebook Q&A group, the Facebook Issues group, came up was, what if there were imposed a limit of 3 questions rather than a limit of 3 minutes or whatever, in responding to each of the entities, that there would be at least that much time given. I know there's a huge deal with, you got 10, 15, 18,000 people in one room or close to that. And you're trying to control a schedule and move everybody in and out. But how can we address this issue that people feel like they're being manipulated constantly from the platform, whether it be by an entity head or it be by the president or somebody else, to keep moving thing along? Sometimes they think the parliamentarian's biased, but I've known several of those guys over the years, and they typically are not. They're pretty cut and dry. But what can we do to address that? Is there a way to be able to get messengers questions answered more than just in that brief time frame?
Yeah, it's obviously it's a challenge when you've got that many people in a parliamentary meeting. I've been told it's the world's largest business meeting, and it might be. So it can be chaotic. It's not really chaotic, but it's complex. Let's say when you have that many people wanting to ask questions and certain people wanting to ask certain types of questions. But here's what I would say. We come to the annual meeting to conduct business, and I'm grateful that there are moments of preaching and singing, and we need those moments. But we need to understand that the priority of the annual meeting is actually to conduct the business of the convention. People have a right to ask certain questions, and they have a right to engage in debate. So I think I don't know that I have an answer. Oh gosh, if we change this, that's an interesting idea. I'll listen to any idea. If somebody says, "Hey, at least 3 questions" or something like that, I'll listen to any idea. But I would say this: I think it ought to be the priority of people on the platform to let the messenger speak. I want. This may have been in Barry McCarty's book years ago, but somebody said the purpose of parliamentary procedure should be to protect the rights of the minority and to ensure the will of the majority. And I've always thought that was good, to give everyone an opportunity to speak or voice or make an appropriate, motion. but to make sure that in the end, the will of the majority prevails, it's not, we're not doing some in and around. I think the thing that is contributed, let me say this, I think the thing that's contributed to the frustration is that the platform sometimes has a very distinct opinion and everyone knows it. And that's because they're human beings. But we've seen several cases where people who are on the platform or connected with the platform get more time than people on the floor. So if you're trying to argue a motion from the floor, you get 3 minutes at a microphone. If you've ever been there, it's very unnerving. You're down there, you get this huge echo coming back. You don't get to practice. It's hard. Honestly, if you've ever spoken in a microphone from the floor, it's like this massive echo coming back. And then juxtapose that with the guys on the platform and everything around them that looks official. And when the platform takes a side, so I'll give you an example of this. And I don't mean, again, I'm not trying to disparage. We're just having honest disagreement here. But when last year in the law amendment, then it was the Sanchez amendment, I think, last year. When that came up and Dr. Org of the executive committee was able to get an extended amount of time, it seemed like more than 3 minutes, and was able essentially to argue that if we passed this amendment, we were going to get sued. In so many words, that's what he was saying. I got to warn you about lawsuits. And there was this extended explanation. Well, the messengers sitting in the hall are hearing their leaders giving them this extended defense, really, or argument to not pass the Sanchez amendment. Well, first of all, do you get more than 3 minutes when the messengers on the floor only get 3 minutes? And then debate on the amendment itself is limited. It's like 1 or 2 people got to speak, and then somebody calls the question, and which they have the right to do, of course. And so debate gets shut down. And so one of the big reasons why people went to the convention ends up being, 10 minutes. And most of that time is the platform talking. So I just think that it's so important for people who hold the gavel to ensure the rights of the messengers. Make sure there is adequate time for debate, adequate time to that's why we come. Our churches send us in many cases. We've taken time out of our schedule. So let's make sure that there's adequate time for debate. And another part of that is the scheduling that comes into these conventions, where you put things. We've all been at conventions, Bobby, where, they put something at the last minute, and this happened a couple of years ago with the big controversial Resolution 9 in 2019. Everything got loaded up in the last minute. So you got all these panels, and I was on one of them. You get all these panels, you get all this other stuff. That's okay. That's interesting. But then the actual votes now we got to hurry and pack them all in there. There wasn't enough time given to the messengers to debate and discuss the issues. And the platform needs to protect the rights of the messengers.
Yeah, I think many would agree that you have represented exactly how the messengers feel. Yeah. You feel slighted at minimum as far as being able to really unpack and hear both sides of any issue and debate that out. Well, look, let's wrap up with this. This is a huge issue, and it's one that's of key importance to the long-term survival of the Southern Baptist Convention, and that is our cooperative program. The cooperative program has been in steady decline for some time, and many have been targeting the cooperative program continuing to decline because people are increasingly unhappy with the financial transparency and some of the things that have been happening in leadership in over a decade, the last decade and whatever. And not to be unfair, but take the ERLC. We hadn't addressed that at all, but issues related to the ERLC or the Baptist Joint Committee when it was that years ago. Almost every year there is someone that brings up an issue because it's a very volatile issue. And again, the ERLC has stimulated that. But the reality is people pulling back their cooperative program giving, their participation, because they're unhappy what's happened at the RLC or is happening, what's continuing to happen with the North American Mission Board. They see what's happened at Southwestern Seminary, what's happened at ABC. You just named the entity at some point, and churches are pulling back. And I have in my file letters that pastors have sent to the executive committee telling why they're withdrawing and no longer giving through the cooperative program. Many of them still are participating in their association and their state convention, just not the cooperative program, which ultimately hurts our missionaries, et cetera, et cetera. But this was addressed in the executive board meeting by Dr. Org, Jeff Org. And I want you to respond real quickly to just a clip of what he said, but it's all in line with exactly what's happening with the cooperative program. And I want you to address how we need to move forward with this as well.
Changes in the cooperative program are rooted in a worldview shift that has marked Western culture and unfortunately bled into SBC life. The problem is the fracturing influence of expressive individualism, the dominant worldview of our time. Expressive individualism is the root of cultural developments ranging from obsessive sharing on social media to convincing children they can choose their own gender. It is the worldview which demands mass customization and at the same time fuels aggressive tribalism. Southern Baptists live in this cultural milieu and are being influenced by it. This is troubling because expressive individualism is theologically and philosophically antithetical to cooperation, which is the theological and philosophical foundation of our combined efforts.
Your response, Pastor Rice?
Yeah, I was disappointed by that comment, and I know a lot of people were. I heard from them, and I don't think the problem is expressive individualism. I think the problem right now is kind of an arrogant institutionalism, and I think that lecturing Southern Baptists is the last thing our leaders need to be doing right now. I think the people will give for what they are inspired by. They will give when there's trust, when they're inspired, and they believe in a greater vision. Lecturing them, berating them, accusing them of essentially having the same mentality that fuels the transgender movement, that is not a way to inspire trust and confidence and hope among Southern Baptists. The way forward, I mean, think about the abuse reform movement, and, you know, we hardly get, maybe we can come back and talk about that another time, you know, but I'm told that we have spent somewhere around or even north of $15 million in that over the last few years. And I would love to tell you that we spent that to make our churches safer. If I told you we spent $15 million, but I tell you why we did it, we made our churches safer. Very little of that was used to equip our churches or help our churches, which should have been the focus of every reform effort. Instead, that money has been mostly wasted on lawsuits and lawyers because of really bad decisions that we were led to make. And that kind of malfeasance, that kind of error and wasting of money is not what is going to inspire Baptists to step up and say, oh, I want to give even more to the cooperative program. We had to add $3 million in last year's cooperative program budget back into the executive committee because basically we bankrupted it. So we've actually added more money into the executive committee, and we have spent $15 million, and it's still going, Bobby. It's still going. That number could reach $20 million. I was told by somebody, when it's all said and done, it will be $20 million and more. You might as well, for most of that money, you might as well have put it in a wheelbarrow, put it in the backyard, and set it on fire. Now, maybe that's the problem. Maybe the kinds of mistakes we've been making have caused Southern Baptists to lose confidence. And I know that's been the case in a lot of places that I'm aware of. So I don't think lecturing Southern Baptists on expressive individualism is the way to go. I think it is going to be showing some humility, showing some transparency, showing some accountability, And let's inspire people with a vision that will make them want to sacrifice, and they will. Our Baptist people are a Great Commission people, and they're generous people. They will give, but they've got to have the confidence that when they're giving, they are fueling and they are funding Great Commission efforts, not blowing money because of really bad decisions that we made to satisfy some social justice warriors.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head for sure. Look, as we wrap up, what is there anything else that you would like to be able to hit on, to be able to unpack that would help people better understand kind of what your leadership as SBC president would look like?
Well, as I said, Bobby, my prayers for a Baptist renewal, and it's not about a man. It's got to be about a movement. It's not going to be, a referendum. We need just a revival. And I think ultimately it's my last pillar, but I said it's by no means the least. We need a renewal of spiritual vitality. We need humility, brokenness, prayer, and we need to see God move in our midst. And another one of those pillars is global intentionality. How long has it been since we've had a clear, compelling vision for our Great Commission efforts? We've been focused on so many other things and other issues we've gotten distracted and we've gotten divided. One of the things I would love, and I hope to begin to talk about a lot next year is, we're going to come up in a few years on the 2000th anniversary of the giving of the Great Commission, probably in 2033. Most would tag that. 2,000 years since our Lord gave us the command to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. Wouldn't it be great if Southern Baptists were united by a renewed effort to get the gospel to every person in our nation, and to once again, and to really strive, not once again, but to strive for a historical milestone of getting gospel engagement into every nation, tribe, tongue, and language on the face of the earth in 7 years? We could do this. This is what makes us want to gather and cooperate. We've got to quit being distracted by these other things and divided by these other things. There are issues you got to take care of, and we got to take care of those issues. But I really think our Baptist people are hungry for a mission that unites us and draws us together and would be something historic in our lifetime. To see a pursuit, and maybe not a fulfillment, that's in God's eyes, but to pursue the fulfilling of the Great Commission. That's what we ought to get back to. And I would love to be a part of that. I would love to be a voice in that. I think we got to take care of these other issues, but we've got to give a vision to our people that will inspire them again. And I don't think we've been doing that. But I think we could.
Pastor Willie, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your insight and taking the time to be able to try to unpack some of these things. It's been very, very helpful for us to be able to see those. And I thank you for joining us again today. All right, until we have our next guest join us in this series, we hope that this has been helpful to you to understand the presidential candidates and the positions that they take.